Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 7th of December of 2025. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. So, according to information we received during the previous 24 hours, it seems that Russians are planning to launch two more offensive operations, very powerful offensive operations. The first one the Russians are going to launch in the Kharkiv direction, and the second one the Russians are going to launch in the Slaviansk-Kramatorsk direction. So, as of the next 2 or 3 weeks, the Russians will be completely focused on finishing the current offensives. First of all, the Russians will try to finish the battle for the city of Gulay Pole. We don't know for sure whether the Russians are going to move further in the western direction with the purpose to take under control several villages of the, let's say, Orekhov direction. We're talking about these territory. So if Russians, of course, are able to capture these territories, this is going to be very useful for them before moving further, let's say in the early spring or something like this, further in the western direction. So as of now, we still think that Russians may launch or could make a short operational pause for regrouping, because the Russians started their offensive operation in this area a long time ago, more than 8 or 7 months ago or 9 months ago, with the battle even earlier, maybe a year ago. The group of forces started their offensive operation from the city of Vuhledar, and obviously this unit is pretty exhausted. Maybe they need a short pause for months or 2 months or something like this, and then the Russians will resume their offensive. The second offensive that the Russians are going to start and finish in coming days, weeks, 2-3 weeks before 2026, of course, is the battle for the cities of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. And of course, the Russians will try to finish the battles for Liman-Siversk direction. And when they finish these let's say, missions, these battles, the Russians will launch two more offensive, or the Russians are about to do this. Once again, this is the Kharkiv offensive and this is the Slaviansk-Kramatorsk offensive. So let's start and let's discuss everything in details. And first, let's talk about the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region. We're going to talk about the territory between the Pechenegi water reservoir and the border. So during the previous 24 hours, as for the villages of Vilcha, Biely Kolodets and Vovchansky Hutory, nothing special was recorded. We just have lots of videos of how Russians were bombing positions of the armed forces of Ukraine using TOT flamethrower system, so which means that most likely in coming minutes the Russians would launch their offensive. And we have a video published from the southern part of the settlement of Vilcha. The Russians are saying that they managed to discover the position of the 225th Separate Storm Assault platoon, and they attacked this territory. So what is happening right now? The Russians are finishing the battle for the settlement of Vilcha. The Russians are moving in the eastern direction from the city of Volchansk, but these are just a preparation before moving further deep inside of the Kharkiv region. So why did we decide that the Russians are going to do this? The thing is that during the previous 24 hours we received lots of videos from the Pechenegi water reservoir. So this is the video, and we have just one video, but we received lots of updates from this territory. So this is the Pechenegi water reservoir, and this is the dam, and this is the dam in the most southern part of it. And as you can see, the dam was completely destroyed and damaged as a result of Russian fire. So this situation took place these days, maybe today, maybe yesterday, but just today the video was published. This is a very important video because this road T21A11 used to be one of the most important supply roads for the armed forces of Ukraine in the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region. And now we see that this road was completely destroyed. So this is the first dam, this is the first supply line that was destroyed by Russians during the previous 24-48 hours. Another dam was destroyed a bit further in the southeastern direction, and the sources are saying that another dam was damaged and destroyed in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Stary Saltov. So based on this, we came to the conclusion that the Russians are trying to destroy completely the logistic of the armed forces of Ukraine between the city of Kharkiv and the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region. So the main reason of this is to force Ukrainians to use just one possible supply road that goes through the settlements of Yurchenko, Veliki Hutor, and so on. So just these small territories, the Russians want Ukrainians to use just this small territory, this small corridor between the Pechenegi water reserve and the river Voskol, with the purpose to supply their contingent in the area of the settlements of Biely Kolodets and Veliki Burluk. So if Russians are able to do this, if Russians are able to force the Ukrainians to do this, then of course it will be much more easier for the Russians to control this territory with FPV drones, because the distance between the current positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the area of the settlement of Zapadne and the Pechenyogi water reserve itself is around 40 kilometers, which is already nothing for artillery and FPV drones and so on. So this is the thing, and the Russians are going to launch this offensive very soon. The Russians have already finished everything they needed for this offensive by taking under control the city of Volchansk and settlements around the city. So they will continue moving further. And this is the reason, and this is the main reason why the Ukrainians, during the previous 2 weeks, have been carrying out the counter-offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Kupiansk. The Ukrainians understand what the Russians are going to do, what the Russians are tasked for. So that is why they understand that the only way how to stop the Russians, or at least to slow them down, is to counter-attack the Russian positions through the settlement of Kupiansk, especially through the settlement of Kupiansk of its western part, and to force the Russians to fall back. If Ukrainians are able to recapture the city of Kupiansk on the Ukrainian side of the river Oskol, this may ruin the Russians' plan about the entire northeastern part of Kharkiv region. So I would like to remind you that during the previous days we adjusted, let's say, recolored the map significantly. This is the situation in the area of the city of Kupiansk by the end of the 4th of December. This is the 5th of December. This is the 6th of December. And this is the 7th of December. So Ukrainians managed to improve their position significantly. And it seems that the Ukrainians will try to intensify their pressure on the Russian positions, because they understand that during this negotiation period of time, it's not a very good thing to lose territories, because obviously if if an agreement between Russia and Ukraine is being signed, obviously this agreement will be signed either along the line of combat contact or along the line of combat contact and the rest of Donbas region. So that is why Ukrainians need to stop the Russians, no matter the price they're going to pay for this. Another important update from the Kharkiv or Kupiansk direction is that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Kucherevka. Today this information was confirmed and provided by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. The Russians stated that the units of the Group of Forces West had managed to establish complete control over this territory. So let's compare the map between the dates. This is the situation by the end of the 6th of December, and this is the 7th of December. A few weeks ago, the Russians reported that they secured the settlement of Petropavlovka, and we see that the Russians continue advancing. Now the Russians are tasked to finish the battle for the city of Kupiansk, for its eastern and southern part, and to recapture the territories they lost. And the Russians will begin offensive operation towards the settlements of Podoli and towards the settlement of Kurilovka. So they will try to encircle the city of Kupiansk-Uzlavoy from the north, from the northeast, and from the east. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Siversk-Liman direction. This is another area where the Russians are planning to launch their offensive operation in coming days. And the reason of this is that the Russians are about to finish the battles for the cities of Siversk and Liman. So in coming months, these two settlements would be captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, which this result will open an operational space, the Slaviansk operational space for the Russians. And from this very moment, the Russians will begin advancing towards the heart of Donbas Arc operation that was started in 2022 at the beginning of the special military operation. But to attack the city of Slaviansk from the north, northeast, and from the east is not enough to take the city very fast. So that is why the Russians are planning to launch the offensive operation along the MO3 road between the settlements of Bakhmut and the settlement of Slaviansk. So now let's discuss everything in details, and first let's talk about icons updates that we received during the previous 24 hours. The most important updates are coming from the city of Siversk. As you can see, the map has been adjusted significantly in comparison with the previous day. This is the situation by the end of the 6th of December, and this is the situation by the end of the 7th of December. So as you can see, the entire eastern part of the city of Siversk was colored to the territory under control of Russian forces based on the video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. So this is the video, and this is, let's discuss the moment. According to this moment, the map was adjusted. So once again, this is the eastern part of the city of Siversk, and let's take a look at this moment. here we can see a Russian soldier. Let's take a look at this point. It's a Russian soldier. So as you can see, he was running and he entered the building itself. So, and the Ukrainians later began attacking Russians in this area. So based on this video and based on another episode from the same video, we have colored the entire eastern part of the city of Siversk. But during the previous 24 hours, another important video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and this time from the central part of the city, from the area of the school number 1. So from this area. Let's take a look at this video, and here we can see the Ukrainian drone that was attacking the Russian flag. So this is the flag of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and the flag was attacked by Ukrainians. So this is the moment, and this place was geolocated, this construction was geolocated. This is exactly the area, this is exactly the place where the Russian flag was installed, and this is exactly the moment, the place where the Russian flag was attacked by Ukrainian drone. So once again, this is the episode we are talking about. Ukrainian drone discovered the Russian flag, and then the Ukrainian drone attacked the flag. So the importance of this video is that the question is how exactly the flag of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and most likely how exactly the sign of the unit that was responsible for taking this territory under control were established there. So of course there are two options. Either the Russian flag was established by Russian soldiers, or the Russian flag was established by a Russian drone. So two options, and of course two options means completely two different pictures of this area. So if the flag was established by Russian soldiers, this means that the city of Siversk has already fallen. The city of Siversk has already fallen, and the Russians are finishing the clearing operation, and most likely in coming days, maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow, maybe in a week, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm this information. At least maybe the Russians will announce control over the city of Siversk, at least over its eastern part to the river of Bakhmutka. So everything to the east of the river would be captured or have been already captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And the second moment is that the flag was established by drone. This time no changes on the ground, it's just another media attack from the Russian side or some special operation on the territory of the city of Siversk to misunderstand or mislead Ukrainians on the ground, showing them positions that are not under control of Russians, but of course this can lead to unpredictable consequences. So another important thing, why we're saying that the flag could be established by Russian soldiers, if you remember, we saw the same story in the area of the city of Volchansk. A few weeks ago, Russians published a video, or Ukrainians published a video, how they were attacking the Russian flag in the most southern part of the city, somewhere in this area. So, here, the Ukrainians attacked with drone the Russian flag right exactly at this point. Took place several days ago, and we discussed that most likely the Russians began installing flags through the city of Volchansk with the purpose to announce control over the settlement within the next several days. So most likely the same situation is happening right now in the area of the city of Siversk. The city of Siversk is under, let's say, 60, 70 or 80% control of the Russians. There are still pockets of resistance, some gaps, but these pockets and these gaps are not able to change the entire situation on the ground. So that is why the Russians began this preparation. They're installing flags through the city of Siversk with the purpose to publish a video or to make a report by the Minister of Defense. So the battle for the city of Siversk, based on everything we've just discussed, most likely is coming to the logical end. The Russians will take complete control over the territory. This will allow the Russians to enter the Slaviansk operational space, and then Russians will begin advancing towards the cities of Slaviansk and Kramatorsk, and this is going to be the end, the final phase of the Donbas Arc operation that started in the 2022. At the same time, the sources stated Russians improved their positions around the settlement of Zakitne. The Russians, as you can see, according to different mappers, managed to take and to cut the settlement of Zakitne in pincers, and now they're trying to advance from at least three directions. The Russians are attacking the settlement from the west, the Russians are trying to cross the river of Seversk Donetsk and to attack the settlement from the north, and the Russians captured TO 513 roads from the east and will also begin advancing in the central direction. So we have discussed the things that we already knew. There is nothing special for us. I'm talking about the thing that the Russians were advancing in this area. The Russians advance in this area, and they will continue. So nothing special, nothing new, at least. But there is another direction is about to be opened, another front line, and we believe that this is going to be the line MO3 and further in the northwestern direction towards the settlements of Raya Alexandrovka and of course Slaviansk. Why do we think like this? First of all, during the previous 3 weeks, the Russians reported that they managed to secure at least 2 villages in this area. We're talking about the village of Vasyukovka and the village of Paziona. So both villages are located right exactly on this direction. Another important video was published today by pro-Ukrainian sources from the area of the settlement by the name of Privilya. So this is the video, and here we can see a Russian drone flying above the area, controlling the situation, and then we can see a very heavy explosion. The Russians are saying that the Ukrainians destroyed the bridge through the river of Kopanka in the vicinity of this small lake. They destroyed this bridge, they destroyed this dam with the purpose not to allow the Russians to use this area for offensive operation. So once again, according to pro-Russian sources, this area, this bridge was destroyed by Ukrainians. And some pro-Ukrainian sources also confirmed this information. So Ukrainians are trying to cut the logistic in this area, and not to cut the logistic, but to cut the offensive roads, because they expect that most likely in coming hours the Russians can begin offensive operation in this area with the purpose to shorten the distance to the villages of Nikiforovka, Fedorovka, Druga, Dibrova, and Raya Alexandrovka. So the Russians can try to shorten the distances between the city of Liman, Drobushova, and the city of Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar along this red line, and then this is going to be the beginning of the battle for the cities of Slaviansk and Kramatorsk, because if Russians capture these 2 settlements, this is going to be the end of the battle for the entire Donetsk region, and this is going to be the end for the current phase of the negotiation process, because if Russians take this territory with military means, not with diplomatical means, you know that currently there is a negotiation process between Russians, Ukrainians, and states, and these 2 towns, these 2 cities are the focal point of this negotiation process. Ukraine doesn't want to withdraw their troops, to withdraw their positions. The United States of America tries to force Zelensky to accept Russians' demands, and the Russians are saying that either with military or diplomatical means, this territory will be taken by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. But if these territories if the Russians take these territories with the military means, this means that the Russians' demands will be increased, and they will force and they will demand to create a buffer zone between Donetsk region and, let's say, the rest of Ukraine, which means that control over the cities of Slaviansk and Kramatorsk can create the situation when Russians will demand Ukrainians to withdraw their positions from the territory, let's say from inside of the territory between this red line and the current control Russian territory. And it's going to be a very, very difficult choice and decision for Ukrainians, but in the end they would be forced to do this, because the Russians will tell us the same: either you will fall back from this territory with the military means or with the diplomatic means. They don't care how to do this. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation about the city of Konstantinovka. During the previous 24 hours, as you can see, some changes were recorded. This is the situation by the end of the 6th of December, and this is the 7th of December. The Russians, according to several pro-Russian sources, managed to improve their position significantly in the southeastern and in the eastern parts of the city of Konstantinovka. Lots of territories were captured. The Russians are getting deeper and deeper inside of the city. Furthermore, the Russians are about to finish the battle for the settlement of Yarolubovka and to improve their position significantly to the northeast of the city of Konstantinovka and to the east of the settlement of Drushkovka. From this foothold, from this bridgehead, the Russians can continue offensive operation further in the western direction, basically to cut this territory into several smaller pieces and then to handle with every single piece separately, especially the city of Konstantinovka and Drushkovka. So 2026 obviously is the last year for the Donbas region. Either with military or diplomatical means, these territories will be taken by Russia, and even faster than the entire 2026. This territory could be taken by Russians even before the autumn of 2026, and then new demands will arise. Now let's move further. As for the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians reported that as a result of clashes, the settlement of Rovne was taken by Russians, of Rivne. So the territory was colored under control of Russian forces based on the report of the Minister of Defense. So this is the situation. These are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the 6th of December. This is the 7th of December. Furthermore, we believe that the Russians are much deeper and that Russia's stormtroopers operate somewhere along this line already. So according to my understanding of the situation, the Ukrainians control just, or how we can call it that this is a control. We believe that the Ukrainians are present only inside of this circle. So everything outside this circle is already under control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation or in the gray zone. So this is the situation. Ukrainians are controlling less and less territories without chances for evacuation, but at the same time, Ukrainians don't want to surrender. Another important video was published from the northern part of the city of Pokrovsk. We have already discussed this video. As of the end of the 7th of December, we still haven't received anything that can clarify the situation. Either the video is archived or it's a fresh video, we don't know for sure. So we have added this icon to the map, but without any understanding, without any vision of how exactly this territory was recaptured by the armed forces of Ukraine. So we are waiting for additional updates. Maybe other resource sources will publish additional updates or some interesting analysis, and then we will consider them before making changes. As for Gulay Pole direction, during the previous 24 hours, a video was published from the most eastern part. We will not watch the video due to casualties and violence, but this video shows and confirms that the Russians have their positions in the eastern part of the city and that the Russians continue advancing. The battle for Gulay Pole is a vital battle for the Russians, and not just this battle, but the battle for the dense layer of the fortifications to the west and the northwest. If Russians can capture this very fast, this is going to be the end for the city, for the territories to the east of the river of Dnipro, at least in this part of Ukraine. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.